All right. Well, welcome. Um, Welcome to Practicing God's Presence, week one. And I'll talk more about the class reading. Let's start with a word of prayer. Lord, as is always the case, we have a lot of things on our mind. And this particularly season in sort of the liturgical year in society, the year, calendar year, societally, is filled with many things. And I ask that as we gather here, we would experience your presence. Maybe let go of some of the things that seem so pressing for us, that would demand our attention away. We can enjoy one another and enjoy you. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So, a couple things. I have a sabbatical, that's coming up in the summer, and the theme of my sabbatical is "Be still and know that I'm God," which is from Psalm 46, which is one of our readings here in the scriptures at the bottom of the page, and specifically Psalm 46:10, and the portion of that which is "Be still and know that I am God." And part of my hope in the sabbatical is that will help me kind of cultivate that very idea of being still and being in God's presence. The thing is, I'm a pretty active person, and so in designing the sabbatical, there's a lot of travel and things kind of involved in that. The idea of going to, spending say 3 months at a monastery or something like that, or 3 months of silence. While that might be good for me, I suppose, is not something that particularly energizes me exactly. And I want to be able to, in my time, kind of cultivate more that sense of God's presence in the day-to-day of life. And so part of my plan was to do a class on Psalm 46 at 10, and be still and know that I'm God. We lost Brenda apparently. I hope maybe she'll come back. But and so as I was contemplating that, I'm like, what am I going to do with, how am I going to do 4 weeks of Psalm 46:10? I'm not really sure how that's gonna go exactly. And then I remembered this book, practicing or God's presence or practicing the presence of God. And you've heard of Brother Lawrence? How many of you have heard of Brother Lawrence? Yeah. And so maybe pretty much everybody. And so I thought of this, and as much as I've known about the book, I don't know that I've ever actually read through it. And so I thought this could be some good, good fodder for us to contemplate in the different elements of what it means to practice God's presence or to be still before God, and so on. So, and the structure of the class is sort of loose in a way. So we'll have. I envision that each time I'll give you a practice that we can try out, and I'll rely on you to come and share some of your thoughts, and then we can kind of go from there. So I'm providing kind of a framework, but I don't feel like it's got to be sort of rigid, that it's got to stick to it. And in the same fashion with the book, um, it doesn't it reads more kind of devotionally, I suppose, in a way, than it does. I mean, there's not a particular narrative or plot line or something like that, so it's not chronological. So I'll be referencing portions from the book, but if you have something that you've read you want to talk about, bring that as well. So I hope that helps at some level. Any questions? We'll talk about Brother Lawrence here in just, but when do you feel God's presence the most, would you say? Do you have any moments that are almost like go-to, or if you wanted to feel God near, that you would do thus and so? And if not, any go-to things, when, just think of a time when maybe God felt really close.
You know, I'm usually kind of surprised when I have that, whatever that special sense is. It wasn't looked for necessarily, it just sort of sneaks up on me, I guess. So it's hard to pin it to a place, you know, or, but certainly outdoors is one of them. Music is one of them.
Mhm.
Could be at home, could be at church. And church is one of them. Not always, but you know, will sneak up on you there, even during the sermon. So, yeah, just sort of, I don't know if I could increase my ability to look for it, but I'm always kind of pleasantly surprised.
Periodically, I have what I call my day with Jesus. It often happens when Diane says, you need it today. Uh, But it's beyond that. And it's always on the water for me. Or by the water. I think the water is the place where I go to both experience Jesus. And it isn't that I always experience Jesus when I'm at the water. There are periodically there is that experience of Jesus. But sometimes it's just reading, studying, being still.
For me, it's in fellowship with other believers. My natural tendency is to withdraw and be by myself. So even when I'm completing a study, it's the motivation to be ready for the class so that I have the answers when I'm called upon. That I'm motivated to get closer to God, and I find that I'm a more complete believer with the body of Christ around me.
In terms of in community, I agree with you. And sometimes, I mean, not that I feel God's presence on my own too, but the times in community are often like, sometimes at a memorial service or, like Ed and Glenda's, 70th.
Yeah.
70th. Yeah, I thought that was, I don't know, I felt God's presence there.
Mornings for me are good because I can, Trees goes to work and leave me alone and I can just have that time. She's not bugging me to do anything, so. It's just nice to have that time to listen to music, worship music. It helps a lot, see a lot. And then reading and then kind of meditating a little bit on what I've read and just. It's just a good time, you know, to be retired for one thing is really nice that you have that time. And so I'm very grateful that I have that time because it wasn't always so, but even when I was working in my working years, you know, I would take time. Because I know how easy it can be just to get distracted. So I find I have to make the time to do that. Otherwise the day just goes and you're off to the races, you know, with all the clutter that can crowd in from everywhere. So. Yeah, it's good.
Others.
I think there's two times, when I'm out in nature. Is a big one, but, and music is another one, but I don't listen to music at home, to me, it's just. A distraction. But when I'm and I don't sing, my voice cracks and I can't sing anymore. But I can listen to the words, and those words will speak to me.
Hmm.
I remember in a previous location we were at. In Vancouver, Washington, we were singing some songs that were really speaking to me. And then when it was over and somebody started talking about announcements, it broke the spell, you know,
Hmm.
that was disappointing.
Yes.
But I can get into the music by watching the words and listening to it being sung. Not always the ones with words, sometimes it's just the music itself, too.
Yeah, what is it about certain kind of music? I mean, even the tunes, some some tunes and how they're presented are just. They're more heavenly or something. I mean, seems like some music just comes from a different space, you know, just something from. A friend of mine sent me says, here's for your morning devotions. Not that I have morning devotions, but I did that morning because he said it was, he sent me a link to Brigham Young University's combined male and female choir and orchestra singing Come Thou Fount of Every Blessed. I mean, there's something that just, oh, sweeps you up and I thought, you know, this isn't normal. This is godly.
Maybe Michael can join us one time and
Yeah.
shed some light on that. I think there are certain, I don't know if they're chords or notes or whatever that, or harmonics,
Yeah.
you know, that, I mean, there's some that are really scary, kind of, right? They, you know, like in horror movies or something like that. And there are others that are very, you know, uplifting. There's a song that we sing and worship, Christ Be Our Light. And I think if you Google Christ Be Our Light, hymn or whatever, you can find a, you know, YouTube, video, you know, there are no people there, but it's some choir, you know, sings it. And there's a descant in there that, I don't know what that would be, an alto, maybe soprano brother sings. Yeah. And, trying to remember the best thing. Okay. Brady, Amber, any experience? No, it's,
I think more I'm reflecting on the idea that all these are times quiet
yeah,
and how our life is generally full of not quiet. Even when it's quiet, we can find ways to make it not quiet. Like I like hiking, and people go hiking with like Bluetooths, you know,
Yeah.
and those are people to be thrown off a cliff, but even in really fancy, you know, friendly places like Seattle where everyone's accepted, it's like, this guy's just go to the gym. But that idea, like we're constantly with the need to fill quiet spaces and things, and I think that was kind of reflecting on that, like, you know, as like the idea that it could sneak up on you, but we don't even get the opportunity to sneak up on you. I myself more guilty than most, you know, and I was like, who's kind of thinking that?
I just saw an article on how people, it's a new trend now, phone sober hiking. So you leave your phone at home. It's a new thing now. So.
Hey,
Yeah.
can I ask you, not to get too personal, but when you do art, is there anything in that process that elicits?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it does, and I don't ever know which one it is. You know, and I can know when it's happening, but I can't ever really drum it up. Cause like, whenever I know it, I'm like, oh, this is. And for whatever reason, it's impactful to me.
Yeah.
And it's usually not while I'm drawing it, it's usually when it's done. Or, you know, and I'm like, and then I'll know that that will have a resonance that is different than others, but can't ever really know when it's good or whenever it's not.
I was thinking as like, I was just thinking like, I know there's times when I feel closer to God than others, but like several things were coming up, like. One of them is when it's raining and there's kind of a history to that, and then like one of it is kind of being in a flow state, this is. Or like, when you're working on something that's just kind of. It might be like who God created you to be, like you're doing this thing that God's put in you to do and you're there and. Sometimes it might be like in reading, but if there's enough space or something like that, I mean specifically reading something related to God. But not always, I mean, it can be many other things, right, just related to humanity and things like that. And then I was like, well, what is the thread here? And I think that the thread, at least in part, is paying attention. That it's like I'm attending to whatever the thing is, right? And that is probably when conversely, when that's lacking, it's because my attentions are elsewhere, right? Like whether that is like ruminating or whether it's like busyness or something like that. And so it's almost, and I think that goes into the creating the space for it to happen or the quiet for it to happen. But I think that there's something about attending that is when I do experience that.
Which attending is kind of showing intention, being intent about seeking,
Yeah,
right?
well, it might be a little bit, if I think of. Not to get too granular, but like if I think of intention, sometimes it feels like there's work behind it, right? Like I'm working toward it. But I kind of mean, I don't necessarily mean that I'm purposing forward, but maybe just. Maybe it is, I'm trying to not say present, but like, just that to be all there rather than be kind of everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think intentionality is sort of like when you're saying, your devotion time or something like that, some different people have different ways of, whether it's sitting down with a devotional, going on a hike. Mark Charles, we read in Inconvenient Truths, he every morning he gets up and watches the sunrise. And that's part of his, his time with Creator. And part of me thinks that could almost work for me too. I just we have some amazing sunrises around here, and usually they happen after, or before I get up. So around the time of getting up and taking a shower or something. So even on a kind of a, even on so days, we can have pretty cool sunrises. Anyway. Yeah, so that intentionality part, I mean, maybe that's something we can explore a little bit. I'm also curious, like, where do we experience God in chaos? Because I mean, yeah, stillness and quiet and all that kind of stuff, that's great and thing. But the reality of life is that it's often, it's kind of not exactly that's not exactly the case. It doesn't mean that God's not there. I mean, I would think that God is especially there in chaos, places of, of war and violence and things. Um, you know, and so I don't know, just something to think of, like those moments maybe where time kind of slows down. Have you seen like Saving Private Ryan, D-Day and all that, and then all of a sudden those moments and people have been in well, not only like battle, but in trauma situations can talk about, things just really slowing down,
So we had a real lockdown situation in our school a few weeks ago. And it's very interesting because a few outside because one of our coworkers had just come back from lunch. So he was able to tell us what was going on. So we had this kind of, we're heightened, but we were very at ease. All these other people in different classrooms had no clue what was going on. We're barricading doors, whatever. We were able to say, oh yeah, it took 20 like 23 minutes from the time it was called to when it was cleared. And other people that didn't have that knowledge that we had were like, oh, it had to have been like 45 minutes. They had no idea the time like stretched out, and they were like, it was only 22 minutes, you know. So it was really interesting. It felt like for them it took forever because they were so afraid and, alert and stuff, so.
I think in the midst of chaos, it almost uh, demands that we are more intentional, that our focus is where it needs to be, that our trust is what it should be, that that if we fall, if we're going to let ourselves fall victim to chaos, then we become a victim rather than someone who has been able to ride through it and rise above it and become more capable of dealing with it in the future.
I think I'm reading a book called Why Not Be a Mystic? And I have no idea who the author is, but, I think it was in that book that he says in chaos, it's in chaos that we seek God or we don't seek God at all. That either way can go. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. Well, I don't know if we're feeding the chaos as much as we're just so afraid that we don't, fear becomes the primary motivation.
Makes me think of that footprints in the sand, poem that we're also familiar. Those times that he carried us. And to me, that's what it's been sometimes where I wasn't consciously aware of my.
What sorts of things do you hear God saying in those moments where you feel God's presence?
Just the reassurance that he's there.
Okay.
That he's with you.
I got this.
I got this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just get a sense of just kind of overwhelming peace. Like it's okay.
Okay to jump in at this point? Sure. So what do I hear God saying? The mystic is kind of where I'm hardwired and I can get myself into trouble. I won't go on and on. So I hear weird things. Like one time on the tennis court, I was out having a really great time. I was like playing, having a great time with my friend. And I got done, I'm all sweaty and I'm standing there and I hear, who made those legs?
Yeah.
And I literally started crying because it was like such a gift to go, of course you did. And but did I make that up? I don't know. Maybe was that the Holy Spirit? I think it was. And how did the Holy Spirit know exactly what to say that would catch me off guard and make me grateful? And so another one that I've heard that's really weird is like stop watching TV. Like, ow. Still wrestling with that one, so it's out there.
I think we're kind of a culture where there's always you go to some people's homes and they don't even turn off the TV or, you know, what I mean,
Mhm. Oh,
a
yeah.
visitor or something. I mean, people are so. They find a certain security in having that noise or that background and
Yeah.
it's interesting.
And the problem is that with those places that where the TV's always on, that they're not like, you know, sitcoms or movies or whatever. It's,
The Fox.
yeah, it's some sort of
Or
news.
some kind of cable news or
Yeah,
something.
right, yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes music, but,
Used to be the Weather Channel.
yeah, it's.
Back in the day, honest to goodness, but
Yeah.
yeah, I remember when I don't know what it was, man, when the Weather Channel first came on and cable. I remember going, you know, home after home when we're, you know, hospitals visiting with people. They had the Weather Channel on.
Okay, now you're getting personal. Watch it, buddy.
I
Now it's cable news.
I usually have a book on TV on in my car whenever I'm driving. And I didn't have one and I had one of the channels on and all of a sudden there was a click and it stopped and I thought. And I tried to get it back and it didn't come back and, you know, so here I am driving for quite a while with nothing on. And then I stopped and took something back to the library and I got back in my car and it came back. So I don't know what happened, but it was just like. This is so quiet.
She should go with us.
What?
We never turn anything on in the car. And we talked to each other for a while. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I love having listen. That's when I listen to books. This is car. Music. Or music.
Um, any other things about, you know, what you hear from God, I guess?
I think I hear fatherliness, like,
Huh.
so in the same way that Michael was saying, sometimes there's like stern admonition to do or not do, and then other times there's like I think kind of care or value statements or something like this that a father would do. And I think I think that's something that I miss a lot in my life, and so I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, sometimes there's just kind of like awe, like, you know, some sort of moment of awe and thank. Or that like, oh, it really caught my attention. Outside of awe, it's fatherly statements of, in which I can think of a handful of those kind of things. I'm like, oh, man, like, well, those are like do this and those are stuff. You know, sometimes it's very coach like.
That's kind of a voice. Anyone else have like a voice like that in a particular perspective, you know?
I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire life when God has spoken to me. I don't usually hear God speaking.
So, but you feel more of a, then how would you describe the being with God, I guess?
I'm not sure how I would describe it. Sometimes it's peace, a sense of awe, a sense of peace. Sometimes I think sometimes it's simply a sense of amazement. But it's very seldom that I hear a voice speaking to me.
Yeah, I would add to that is gratitude. When that happens, I have an overwhelming sense of gratitude.
Yeah, I think that's also the case.
Yeah.
Yours, is it?
Oh, very, very rarely is there voice, but it's more like the awe, the gratitude kind of
Yeah.
idea, or and then that build of care, or like maybe somebody said, like what a child would probably feel if somebody if they felt loved by their parent or whatnot, you know, it may not be like, I love you, but there's something, you know, some sort of like care. I think I feel that way a lot with like the gratitude and seeing things or just kind of recognizing. I have disciplines where it's like, I try to just spend an amount of time like counting all of the things like, you know, grateful for, and you can just get into like this like fractal like infinity loop, which is just pretty dope, you know, because you're just like, okay, need to recognize that I'm being well cared for.
Yeah, when I think of a voice too, I'm not necessarily thinking of like an audible voice, but like, you know, God might come to us through the voice, like you described like a fatherly voice or something like that, or, you know, but
Like, I would say though, there has been 2 or 3 times, or 3 or 4 times, where I have literally heard God speak in an audible voice to me. One, and I heard God speak to me. And said, Diane will fall in love with these people and this place, and she will not return home. There was a point in time, and I didn't know what to do with that. The only person I shared it with at that point in time was my sister. And she didn't know what to do with it either. When Diane literally said, I love these people and I love this place. The exact words.
yeah.
But she did return home. And was that, I don't know why that was. Except it was a preparation for me in that fairly soon after that, she died. After we came home. She ended up with cancer and died. And that was a preparation for me. I knew she would not recover from the cancer. She didn't, but I did. So that was one of a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know. Was just God. I don't know what God was doing with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say probably one of the challenges, you know, as we think about, you know, what we hear, feel, you know, from God, it's we wonder, like, is that my voice or is it whatever, right? Am I, you know,
All the time.
Do you have it's a 2-minute story, but it's all about this struggle. Try to cut it down to a minute, but can I tell the story?
Yeah. Oh.
So again, I'm kind of a mystic. You know, that's just the way I experience the world, and I'm also auditory. I'm a musician, so I hear things. I was going to just throw that on the table. We're all wired differently. Some of us see things in our imagination, some of us hear, some of us feel. It's like, you know, so I'm auditory and mystic, and I was wrestling with the idea of being under authority. This is back when Mike Stenger had cancer, and I was leading the men's gospel choir. He was a dear member, and praying fervently with God. It's like, so how do I pray with you? I want to argue. If you find 50, if you find 40, if you find 30, will you spare the city? Lord, how many years can I ask for Stinger? I want him to be healed. We all love this guy. And I was literally in my mind having this conversation with God and hearing what I thought were responses. And the response I finally got was, I was like, I want him to live for 5. Well, you can ask for 2. It's like you can ask for 2 more years of his, you know, being healed. And you could parse that out for me, because what ended up happening was he died within a few months. But I shared that story with the men's gospel choir,
And my sense of coming away from it was, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing or what I'm experiencing. I could very well be making this all up in my head, or Lord, you could have just flat out told me, look, you can ask for whatever you want, but he's going to die. You know, just tell me that, because I feel foolish. I feel like a fraud. I feel I'm still carrying some of that. First it was anger and resentment, and now it's just sort of fear, like, I don't even want to be mystic. I don't wanna go there because I'm totally out of. And probably a great big portion of who I am, like, who made those legs? Oh, thank you, Lord. That sensitivity is like who I am, but I'm still saying or died, I'm holding God over there.
God does like to humble us once in a while.
Um,
Definitely feel humble.
let's take a look. I just made some bullet points about Brother Lawrence. You can pick all these. I mean, it's kind of pretty much out of the book and everything, but some highlights to who was Brother Lawrence. I mean, wasn't like a saint or anybody of renown. Born in 1614 in how do you say that? Yeah, I missed that one. Which so the significance of that region of France, bordering Belgium, Luxembourg, or present day, Belgium, Luxembourg, that we would now consider Germany. It's far more complex than I could put down in a few bullet points, but largely a number of kind of, if you may, sort of turf battles over religious ideology, not exclusively, but and I think there was sort of a destabilization that kind of opened the pathway. It began with the Roman emperor, it was still kind of not like emperor like Caesar, but anyway, Roman emperor that basically established Christianity throughout the region. And you had Calvinists and Lutherans that were objecting to that, of course. So there were these conflicts kind of that had religious roots, among other things. Over that 30 years, anywhere between 4.5 million to 8 million soldiers died in the war. And so he grew up in a place that's kind of right, in that closer to the center of those wars and things. Was injured and entered a monastery a few years after going home from battle and everything, entered a Carmelite monastery at age 25. Carmelites, I think, practiced, did I have that right? Did I write that down in here? Maybe I didn't write it down. That poverty and service, prayer, that they upheld. And most notably known is he found kind of the practicing the presence of God while he washed dishes in the kitchen of the monastery. Come to find, so he couldn't stand, and so kind of cool just thinking about being in the shop working with leather and things like that, repairing sandals all this time, which it seems like those are some things that might lend themselves well to as opposed to if he was a welder or something like that. Maybe welding does. I don't know. Welding.
Yeah, there's something about repetitive stuff that doesn't require a lot of cognition.
Yeah.
That it's almost liturgical. It just can sort of lead you into sort of a meditative mindset.
Yeah, and there's absolutely right. And I find myself that there are times where I kind of gravitate towards something like that that's a little more mindless.
We've talked at work about how it's so kind of relaxing to cut out laminated things.
Yeah.
Like these sheets of lamination, you're just kind of cutting and I don't know. Yeah.
I like picking berries,
Mhm.
and there's some moments doing that, Yeah.
Well, Well, like me, it's bird watching or photography, you know, and because you stop and you see the world in a different, you know, in a different way, or you appreciate even the birds that are not very interesting, you know, in a way that we see them all the time, like a jump. So, and the book itself, you know, it's a collection of conversations that this Father Joseph de Buford, you know, had with Brother Lawrence. Um, and some of the core teachings, you know, God is near, always present. And so our task is to become consciously aware of God in our daily activities. And you know, one of the things at the end of the book talks about like how do we do that maybe in our modern sense? I mean, you know, we have things, you know, like media stimuli or whatever that you know would have blown Brother Lawrence away, you know. And who knows though, maybe he would have listened to a podcast while he was working on sandals. I don't know, you know. So it's not to say that the things that we have today necessarily are purely distracting from our finding God's presence. But at the same time, they're certainly different than his. Ordinary tasks, creating sacred moments, acts of worship, washing dishes, repairing sandals, even picking up a piece of straw. Catch that and maybe you read that portion. I'm not sure what that's about exactly.
He did it for the love of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
Every act.
so.
It seems to me that there's no way that he relates to who we are individually. Cause I don't love God the way he, you know, where he talks about loving God.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, that's part of what I want to explore, you know, with this is what, you know, what can we do? Because, you know, I mean, do you have to live in a monastery then? You know, right, there's that too, yeah.
To this
Yeah.
place.
It was I don't know, can't remember, was it 10 years or something before he actually became was that for?
No, he took his vows after 2 years, but he didn't want to because he didn't feel ready, but they had him take his vows. But it was 10 years before he really felt like he came to a sense of living with God all the time. Because he didn't like being in the kitchen.
Stan, can you say more about?
I pick up a piece of straw or
Trash.
or wheat or a weed. And it's not because of the love of God. I'm picking up that weed because I want it pulled. Um, it just, it's just not practical for me.
Back to your point about the practicality of monasteries today, I can say that Ben has benefited from a monastery in Kentucky multiple times. I forget the name of it,
Yes.
Gethsemane, where he would meet a group of men every year, including my dad. And, you know, with intentional fellowship and retreat.
Was that for a period of time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, that's different than living your whole life.
But
For
the
the love
men,
of God.
but the men who lived there provided this ministry to others to benefit from. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. But there is a purpose.
I haven't been shy about. I was in Belize with Nancy, around just Christmas, and I had the sense of, I can be in paradise, and if I'm not in love with God, I'm in hell. Or I can be in hell and be in love with God, and I'm not in hell, I'm okay. And it was just like this weird realization that no matter where I am, if I could still myself the way that I am, would be stilling myself in a monastery, it doesn't really matter what the surroundings are. And the irony would be is I could be in paradise. Belize is absolutely gorgeous, turquoise water, warm, it's perfect. But if my mind is not with God, I'm not in paradise, I'm in hell. So not that I'm there, but I can see glimmers of that, why, spending time in a monastery would align you to, this is not just, feels like a retreat, but it's not, this is reality. Now, can I live that reality in Port Angeles or wherever I find myself?
So it's really a matter of where your heart is.
He says as much.
Yeah, I think my feeling is if you're, it's the vulnerability that, I'm aware of in my own life is being delivered. I spend time with these 15, 20 guys who are ex-alcoholics, and if you've been delivered from something, you're totally, completely powerless over. There's a real sense of awe that comes into your life. I can remember, met Brother Matthew there at Gethsemane, and I was there for this week. And he told me 2 or 3 things about myself. No one else could have known, but he knew. And so I knew I was in the presence of really holy men of God. And just a week somewhere like that can really heighten your awareness of, yeah, I think being delivered for something, being set free completely makes you aware that your ability to live this life doesn't come from you. It comes from Him every single waking day that you're in recovery, and that's you realize at that point your life is not your own, like Paul said, for me to live is Christ and die is gain. But what an awesome thing. There's a song by Ellie Holcomb called I love a lot, called All My Days, and it's just based on Psalm 23. And I just listened to that and I'm just in awe of how I think he mentioned the Father image, and just how great a love the Father has for us to deliver us and be with us and really sustain us. I think that's my biggest awareness of God is that without Him, I'm nothing, He's everything.
See, I know that. Do I always feel that?
Mm,
No,
yeah.
I know it.
I thought, I don't know if this is even enough stuff on here. We're not even about halfway through. So, which is great. I appreciate the conversation. So I want to go just I'll just walk through some of the core teaching pieces and in the time we have left here. And maybe we can look at some of the scriptures and things next week. But so yeah, the idea is that God is always near. And we should become consciously aware of God's presence, that ordinary tasks, right? The prayer is continuous, conversation with God, like speaking with a close friend. And I don't know if that feels any different for you. And I think one of the questions I want for us to maybe explore at another time, maybe next week, is like, what makes what makes this, as you've had a chance to look more at it, what makes this such a popular thing, particularly they say among like evangelical Christians, I guess? I wonder why that is. Maybe you have some thoughts we can share. But a conversation with God, like a close friend, highlighting simple, honest prayer. You know, doesn't have to be super, eloquent or whatever, written out, but just something that's simple. What does that look like? Humility. Um, and along that line of humility, this is, I want to throw in because he was, took a vow of poverty and everything. More I think about it, I kind of feel like, I see more and more why that is. I kind of feel like, we are particularly, handicapped, I think, as far as following, following God, because of our wealth and how much, I mean, not to glorify poverty, but anyway, confession. And I want to spend some time in another week, talking about confession as an element of practicing God's presence. And then just finding joy in, such that picking up a piece of straw can feel like you're doing that for God and so on. So you kind of keep this before you, and there might be some other things that you pull out again, you can just sort of flip through and find something to take a look at, if you want. I do want to read a little bit from him. I'm going to pick some from that third letter that's on page 53, a letter that written in November 3rd, 1685, to a nun in Paris. I'm just going to start I have no idea how Christians can live satisfied lives without practicing the presence of God. I rest with him in the deep center of my soul as much as I can. I'm not afraid of anything when I'm with him this way. And I know that I would fall on my face if I turned from him even a fraction of an inch. Walking with God this way does not exhaust me physically. It helps, on page 53 is where I am. It helps to do without some of the little pleasures of life, things that are acceptable in themselves, but tend to distract us from the Lord. Because in the end, God is not going to let someone who is completely dedicated to him really enjoy any of the other things, the trinkets of life. When you think about it, that is the only way that makes sense. I'm not saying we need to beat ourselves up about this, not at all. Our job is to serve God in holy freedom, which means working faithfully without whining or complaining, keeping to our job description. It also means gently steering our thoughts and minds back to the Lord if we ever get off track. I have to say, though, that we all need to invest 100% of our trust in God. Nothing less will do. This means, and by the way, this is a reminder that this is kind of Brother Lawrence for today's reader. So if you have an older copy or something, which I started off with, it's like, it's a little harder to access his language. So, he probably didn't say 100%.
This is the Eugene Peterson version or something.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, which I prefer. This means that we lay aside all our cares and worries. It might also mean we lay aside some devotions if they get to be just a routine. So there you go. Something we do over and over for the wrong reasons. Obviously, the devotions are good in themselves, but they're also only a means to an end. Once we have grown into the habit of practicing the presence of God, we are with him, because knowing him is our goal. He is our end, and we do not need to fall back on means. We can just keep going deeper with him in our love relationship. We can ride along with him in all the ways our spirits invent, by doing something that praises him, or something that shows him, or by surrendering to him what we know God would have us do and thanking him all the way. I'll stop at that.
We gotta go Montfish.
All right, we'll see you in a little bit.
About skipping out on church.
Um. So. Got a couple minutes. Just, I don't know, you can kind of ponder some of that. I mean, I don't know what to say. But just kind of, there's a sense of like that deep daily, sense of being in God's presence constantly. And I'm not sure if I can even imagine, fathom that. But that's something I want to explore a little bit, because I think on the other end of it is God is always present, and God's desire is always to be in conversation with us. Whether our ability to reciprocate, maybe that's another story. Um, so next time I will use some of the sort of regurgitate some of the things that are on here, like these scriptures we'll take a look at next time. So we didn't obviously even open our Bibles today. But maybe we'll start off with some of that next week. But a practice I'd like for you to do this week is take a walk with God, whatever that might be. But if you're able to, take an actual walk, an actual walk with God, and then afterwards write down some of your thoughts about the experience. Um, whatever that might be. I mean, the idea is to be able to share, but the act of writing it down, or, typing it out, in a note to yourself, it's like in, uh, in, clinical pastoral education, and other clinical settings, it's called a verbatim, right? So, where you have an encounter with somebody, and then right afterwards, you write everything down, and there's a whole process. How were you feeling? What was the setting? And you describe as much as you can. And verbatim means to, like, try to recount the exact words that were said, and so on. And then from that, in a setting, with a supervisor or among a group of people, then you really explore, like, oh, when you said this, what were you feeling? Or when they said that, and so the process of writing down your thoughts about the experience can help a little bit to help you kind of put yourself outside of that moment and explore a little bit more deeply what the experience was. Okay. So you don't have to do a verbatim like that exactly, but that's the mindset that I have in asking you to write down some of your thoughts, so you can kind of share it with us if you feel helpful. So, all right, well, let's close. God, thank you for our discussion. Places that are deep and profound, and maybe other ways that are a little more not trivial, but commonplace. And so pray that you'll be with us as we go on our way today. Help us in our exercise, taking a walk with you, and help us grow as we seek your presence more closely. In Jesus' name.
Amen.